Control everything with Doflamingo. Hello and welcome to the table, and today I'm back with another OP14 deck tech video. Today talking about the puppet master himself, Don Quixote Doflamingo, a mono purple 5 life leader that on your opponent's attack once a turn you can minus and Don and select one of your leader or Don Quixote Pirates type characters and change the attack target to the selected card. In simple terms, hey, I got this really cool 1k body. You're saying the 7k into my life. I actually want you to, swing at that 1k instead. It's great, and also that 1k gets a really cool effect when it dies, so thank you very much. This guy basically controls the entire tempo of the game. What Doflamingo wants to do is you play a bunch of little crappers, force your opponent to swing into those little crappers instead of your life, which you care about, or your big stuff, which you also care about, and then get super sweet effects when those little crappers die. It's just great for you. And then, once you've basically stolen all the tempo from your opponent in the mid-game and early game, you can then just dominate the late game with a bunch of giant monsters, whether it's 9Ks, or 10Ks, or 7Ks, that makes it impossible for your other 9Ks and 10Ks and 7Ks to die. It's just great. This guy is great. He's a pain in the tushy and everybody hates him, but I love him because he's the puppet master. And if you also want to be a complete ass, play Doflamingo. And besides, talking about the leader himself, we got a couple of different categories of cards that we need to talk about. The first bunch being the searchers of the deck. I'm going to talk about two to start things off because there is more than just these two, but I'll get to the other one later. But firstly, I want to talk about Sugar, a absurdly good searcher in this deck. Sure, it basically costs 2 to search with Sugar because it's a 1 cost, 1k power, 1k counter character. It has an activate main, you can rest a Dawn and Sugar to look at the top 5 of your deck, reveal 1 Don Quixote Pirates type card and add it to your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. It sucks because it costs 2. That's always annoying and a pain in the ass. However, sure, your opponent could swing into it and kill it, and then you're sad because you only get to search with it once and it costs 2. However, this is one of the best decks in the game when it comes to making it hard for this little multiple use searcher to die, because the other searcher I want to talk about is Dellinger, a 1 cost 2k power 1k counter character, Don Quixote Pirates character that on KO, so you play for 1 and it's a 2k, so it doesn't do much, but on KO, you add 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it. Look at the top 5 of your deck, reveal a Don Quixote Pirates type card, add it to your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your deck. So it's effectively a searcher, but on defense, which is weird and confusing. But with Don Quixote Doflamingo's effect, you can effectively just redirect and attack into your life right off the get-go into Dellinger. Boom, you're not losing any Dawn because you immediately re-ramp the Dawn that you just lost, and then look at the top 5. So you're getting a searcher, and it's a little harder in the early game for your opponent to go into your life or into a Sugar, because your opponent wants this thing to die. They don't want you to use it multiple times. Dellinger says otherwise, which is great, which is why both of these are 4-ofs in the deck. They weren't always 4-ofs, and I had another copy of another searcher, but these are just such valuable cards that they just have to be 4-ofs as searchers, in my opinion. But getting past the searchers of the deck, let's talk about the ramp cards in the deck. There's a couple of them, and they're all really good in my opinion. The first one being Baby 5, just a simple 2-of in the deck, but this 4 cost 1k counter character, it seems really bad at first, but it does do quite a bit for the deck, because on play you add 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set as active. Great start, because you want to make sure that you have a lot of Dawn to play around with, so you're not losing, your on-curve value. If you're playing second, you play 2s into 4s, into 6s, into 8s, into 10s, etc., etc. Well, you want to make sure that you don't lose that curve because of activating Don Quixote Doflamingo's effect, because you have to minus a Dawn in order to do so. So ramping a Dawn with these kind of effects is perfect. But with Baby 5, it's a little bit worse, because on KO, you can minus a Dawn and add 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life cards. You don't want to miss out on that effect. That's a really dumb and really good effect. But early on in the game, you're losing a Dawn off of Baby 5 and a Dawn off the Doflamingo. So basically, if you play this on 4, You ramp a Dawn, sure, you go up to 5, but then on your opponent's turn, you minus a Dawn in order to block with this effectively, and then minus another Dawn in order to gain a life. Now you go to 5 on your next turn, and it's 7 on the following turn, and it's just awkward for the rest of the game. So it's a 2-up for that reason, but it is still really good in the deck, because in the late portions of the game, if you can play 1 or 2 of these out, it basically blocks twice, because it blocks 1 attack and gains you a life, which are both very good effects. And, yeah, it's still good. Even though it's a 2-of, it's still a very good card in the deck. And a good card to ramp with in general, and just kind of sit on for a little bit, even if you play it on 4. If you just sit on it for like a turn or 2, it can still be really valuable. But the primary card that you want to play when you're on 4 Dawn is Sugar. Because if you haven't already noticed, you kind of want to go even with this deck. If you looked at some of the rest of the deck list, there's a lot of even cost cards. And this card you definitely want to play on 4 more than pretty much any other card in the deck. Because this 4 costs 1k counter character, says on play you ramp an active Dawn, and on KO, if your opponent has 6 or more Dawn on their field, you play 1 Don Quixote Pirates type character card with a cost of 5 or less from your hand. Which is an absurdly broken effect because getting to play things, getting to play more things, getting to go wider. Sure, I lost a body, but I blocked with it effectively and got a 5k or a 5 cost body out of it. So it's pretty good, in my opinion. But yeah, Sugar, even though, again, kind of like with Baby 5, you're not going to use it immediately. You're not the minus Dawn immediately, so you can just play it, get that active Dawn. Maybe you have something like a Dellinger Lion on board that you can, block with effectively. And on your next turn, or on your opponent's following turn, when they do get the 6 Dawn, then you can block with the Sugar, and then get to play a 5 cost. So it's a really good card in the deck still, nonetheless. But then lastly, there is Monet, a stupid card in the deck, because it's a 5 cost 6k 1k counter body that on play ramps you an active Dawn. Really sweet effect. And on KO, draws you 2, trashes you 1, and then ramps you 2 rested Dawn. So it just ramps, and ramps, and ramps, and it's a 6k body. So you can swing with it, and your opponent's like, well, I can attack it, and if you want it to die, sweet. Then you're going to get 2 rested Dawn, and you're going to get a little bit of hand filtering. But if you don't want it to die, you can just redirect it into another card. So it's super nice, because if you want it to be a threat, it can be likely, you can keep it around for longer. If you don't care if it sticks around, you can get that a little bit of extra ramp, some little hand filtering, and be happy too. So either way, it's just great for you. It's just awesome. But then, getting to the next portion of the deck, I want to talk about the 2Ks of the deck, which there aren't a ton of, but they're all really good in my opinion. The first one being Treble, a niche 5 cost body. A theme that you are going to notice with this deck is that you have a lot of cards that say, do this thing, then play a 5 cost body. You already saw it with the Sugar, so in an emergency situation where you need to play a 5 cost to get full value, you could potentially play this Treble because it is a 5 cost 5k body. Counters for 2, most importantly. It does have a decent effect because on your opponent's turn once a turn, when a Dawn card is removed from your field, put back into your Dawn deck, if your leader has a Don Quixote Pirates type, you ramp a rested Dawn. So basically, your Doflamingo Dawn -1 effect on your opponent's turn is just free. You're never really going to get usage out of that. You're just going to counter with this for 2, but hey, it can sometimes matter. So it's just a 2k that's decent sometimes. But then you also got Monet, which is also kind of in the deck for similar reasons to Treble, except this card's a little bit worse. It is a 5 cost 6k body. It doesn't do anything else besides countering for 2. So it's just a niche 2k counter that I think is valuable to have as a 2-of in the deck. But then lastly, there's Usohachi, which also, even though it's not searchable, I still think is very valuable as a 2-of because this 3 cost 3k 2k counter body says on play, if you have 8 or more Dawn cards on your field, you can rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. That can rest a blocker, that could rest a card that you just need to get rid of, and either way, it's just like, if you play this to get value, it can be really good. It can be one of the best cards in the game to just nichely, just get an absurd amount of value, and it's also a 2k counter. And it's just, I don't know, it's a really good card. I don't think it needs to be more than a 2-of, but if you think it should be, I would cut the 2k counter Monets first, and then go from there if you need to. But I would just, I think that the Usohachi and the Monets, each as 2-ofs, works the best as far as ratios go for the deck. But then, the next category of cards I want to talk about is the event package of the deck. So there's one card I want to talk about, that works really well at these events, and why there's an event package in this deck. This card being Don Quixote Rocinante, a 5-cost 6k, 1k counterbody that on play trashes an event from your hand. You may trash an event from your hand, then draw 2 cards. So you can get a little bit of hand filtering, that's nice. But more importantly, way more importantly, at the end of your turn, if you have 7 or more Dawn on your field, you can set 2 of your Dawn as active. This, I don't think should be a 4 of because it gets a little bit too clunky sometimes. However, as a 3 of, I think it's pretty much perfect. Because you generally always want to see 1 copy of this card in a game, and kind of how I think of ratios of cards. If you have a 4 of a card, you want to see multiples of it generally throughout the game. If you have a 3 of a card, you generally want to see 1 copy of it throughout the game. If you have a 2 of a card, it's just a niche card that you want to see every great once in a while. And if you have a 1 of, it's just a silver bullet for something random. But with Don Quixote Rocinante, you always want to kind of see 1 copy of this card, because it's so good, beyond just the fact that it's good for playing events on your opponent's turn, because it sets 2 Dawn as active. It's 2 Dawn you can use to play events. But there's another reason that I'll get to later, but mostly cards in the deck, primarily to get value off of events, because that's super cool. Getting to play more defensive goodie cards on your opponent's turn. These events including Divine Departure, which is a 3 of. You have a decent amount of bricks in the deck, but I don't think it's enough to where you should have a 4 of this card, just in my personal opinion. But this card is a 0-cost counter event, basically. You can trash a card from your hand, give up to one of your leader characters plus 3k power for the battle. So basically, it's like a 2-card 3k counter, but it gets rid of 2 bricks from your hand if you include itself. It costs 2 cards. It's just a good card. It's just a good card when you got a few too many bricks in your hand. But it also has a decent main effect that's really good into the ace matchups, where you can rest 5 of your Dawn cards, and then if you have any given Dawn card, so it basically costs 6 to give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 8k power for the turn. It's just really good nichely in the certain decks, mostly ace, but primarily why it's in the deck is it can, counter by getting rid of a brick from your hand, because you can definitely get too many bricks in your hand sometimes, and still allow you to counter out of something that maybe matters a lot. Like keeping a certain character around for 1 turn longer, or maybe making sure you don't go down to 0 life so that you don't lose to some kind of whatever for 1 more turn, so you get 1 more turn to do something to kill your opponent, or whatever it may be. It's just a good card. Again, I think it's a 3 of, and that's valuable because you kind of want to see maybe 1 copy of this throughout the game. If you see more, hey, you can maybe trash it away to the Rocinante on play. But either way, it's a good card. But then you also got good old, I do not forgive those who laugh at my family. This card is also a 3 of, and the other searcher in the deck that I mentioned earlier. It's a 1-cost main or counter event that looks at the top 3 of your deck, reveals a Don Quixote Rocinante type card other than this card, adds it to your hand, then places the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. So basically the reason why this card's in the deck on top of 8 other searchers is because I don't think there's a ton of other really good events to play off of Don Quixote Rocinante. The only cards I would kind of think of as like potential tech cards for the deck is something like an Everwhite or a Bullet Strain as like other potential good counter events in the deck. But I feel like this card's just a little bit better because you can use it on your opponent's turn and maybe bluff. It's like, ooh, I got a Dawn up or 2 Dawn up with Rocinante. What do I have? And they play around a certain event when in reality you can play this card to get more of the stuff that you need, whether it's a 2k counter and you do need that kind of counter, or if you need another kind of piece to help you set up to win the game, like maybe a 10-cost Doflamingo, then you can use that too. You don't really want to use this as a main, in my opinion, personally. Keep the Dawn up, maybe bluff something, like an Everwhite, and then have your opponent just kind of fiddle with themselves until you just play this and you're like, oh, dang it, and just continue to play those mind games with your opponent. But then the only other event in the deck that I want to talk about is Slow Beam Sword. An obvious 4 of it in the deck. Pretty much every Doflamingo deck I have seen plays 4 copies of this card because it's just so good. It's not searchable, but it is a 2-cost counter event that minuses a Dawn, adds up to 1 or gives up to one of your leader or character cards minus 2 or plus 2k power for the battle. So basically it's a 2-cost 2k counter, which sucks, and it minuses a Dawn, which also sucks. So why is this good? Because then it also rests up to one of your opponent's characters. So it basically can get you out of 2 attacks. It can counter for 1 attack, and then on top of that, your opponent has a giant card that there's no way you can counter out of, and you can just rest it. Or your opponent, in like an ace matchup for example, has a 10-cost Whitebeard, and it blocks, and it's impossible for you to, deal with it or whatever. You can rest it with a slow beam sword. And it even has a decent trigger of adding up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and setting it as active. The trigger doesn't really matter, but what more so matters is just the fact that you can get out of 2 attacks for 2 cost and then minusing a Dawn. That sucks, but I'll explain later why these Dawn minus effects, they're not gonna matter in the late game. Not besides just the fact that, you're gonna be up to around 10 Dawn at that point. But it's a really good card. Then the last category of cards I want to talk about is the killers of the deck. Rosinante, I could fit into this kind of category because he is a 6k body that can help you to kill your opponent. But there's 3 cards specifically I want to talk about here. The first one being Virgo. This guy is just dumb. It's a 5-cost 7k body that once a turn, if your Don Quixote Pirates type character, including himself, would be removed from your field by an opponent's effect, you can instead return a Dawn card from your field to your Dawn deck. That's awesome. Because it's just like, hey, opponent, you're playing a Gravity Blade. You're getting rid of 2 Rosinantes. Okay, I'll minus a Dawn. They both live. That's great. Maybe it's a Virgo and a Rosinante. They still both live. That's awesome. And on top of that, when it attacks, you can minus a Dawn and give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 2k power for the turn. So it can help you to manage your opponent's board state, and on top of that, it helps protect yours, which is awesome. And basically, this card is the heart and soul of why I think this deck can beat Emu fairly consistently. I feel like with Emu, it's still like a hard matchup, but I think Doflamingo is favored against Emu, which is crazy to say, but I do think it's true. But Virgo is one of the main reasons for that. And it's also just a good card in a ton of other matchups, like blue matchups with Red Rock and something like that. And yeah, sure, this guy doesn't counter, but he does plenty of other stuff. It doesn't matter that this guy doesn't counter for the stupidity that he does. But then I got Don Quixote Doflamingo, the first one I want to talk about, and the heart and soul, the engine of the entire deck. Because this card is an 8-cost 9k body that on play can minus a Dawn and allow you to play up to 1 Don Quixote Pirates type character with a cost of 5 or less from your hand. Like a Virgo, like a Rosinante, like a Monet, whatever it may be, it can play it, which is great. And on top of that, on your opponent's attack, once a turn, you can rest one of your Dawn cards and add up to 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck and set it as active. You minus a Dawn with the slow beam, and it's like, crap, I won't be able to play another of this Doflamingo next turn. That's awful, shucks. Or I minus 2 Dawn, basically, with the Baby 5. I block with it for minus a Dawn, and I minus another Dawn to gain life. I won't be able to play the thing or do the things I need to do next turn. Well, you can rest one of those Dawn and then ramp an active Dawn. This is also especially nice with the Don Quixote Rosinante because you you set 2 your Dawn as active, and then on your opponent's turn, you have that active Dawn. You didn't have to keep it up. You instead just got to set it up. Thanks to Rosinante, you can spend one of those Dawn, ramp an active Dawn, and no matter what, whether you have the counter events in your hand or not, you can still get value off of that Dawn being set as active, thanks to Rosinante. The primary reason why I think it should be a 3-up in the deck, because it is just that good with this Doflamingo. It's just great. It's just so good and so broken. Especially in combination with the last card of the deck, Don Quixote Doflamingo, the new one, the 10-cost 10k, on play minus 3 Dawn, Dawn minus 3, to get one of the following effects. If your leader has a Don Quixote Pirates type, care up to one of your opponent's characters with the cost of 8 or less. Or up to 3 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 7 or less cannot be rested until the end of your opponent's next turn. So, you stun 3 of your opponent's cards, or you KO one of your opponent's cards. You're pretty much good at stun. Unless you're playing a deck that just plays a couple of, big monsters. But, stunning 3 of your opponent's stuff is absurd. However, while that is an absurdly good effect to get a ton of tempo and allow your opponent to do very, very little, and allow you to develop another 10k body, overwhelm your opponent more with like a bunch of 10k and 9k bodies, it's hard to chain this guy. The way that this deck wins, especially against a more difficult deck like Emu or Ace, Emu more than Ace, is you chain this card, but you -3 Dawn. So if you have 10 Dawn, you play this, you -3 Dawn, you go down to 7. On your next turn, you go up to 9. Well, you need one more Dawn. How are you going to get that one more Dawn? Don Quixote Doflamingo, the 8 cost one. Because this one, you can use the Rosinante, have that active Dawn up, and then rest one of them with this Doflamingo, get up one more Dawn, get up to 8 Dawn now. Then you go to your next turn, you get 2 more Dawn, now you're up to 10, and you can play another of the new Doflamingo. It's absurd, it's broken, it's amazing. I think it's wonderful and awesome. So that's the deck in a nutshell. You just mess with your opponent, make sure that they don't get too much tempo and value over you in the early game, and you get as much value over them in the early game. Then just overwhelm them with 8 cost and 9 cost and 5 cost bodies, and have counter events up where you need to, thanks to something like a Rosinante, and just control the entire game. Be the puppet master. Embrace the puppet master that is Doflamingo. And just have a blast. It is a very hard deck to play. I'm not going to say it's not. But it is a complete blast of a deck to play. And for any of you who like to play a difficult deck like Doflamingo, I would give it a try. Because it is super fun, and it's not that expensive. It's pretty budget friendly right now. So with all that aside, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It's completely free, your own guys. I hope you all check out my other OP14 videos. Check them out right here. Maybe my OP14 pack opening series. Check that out right here. And I will see you all there. And have fun playing Doflamingo. Being the puppet master. And controlling everything.